As you take all of this in and the results, NewsNation and Decision Desk headquarters, the first to call the race for president. At what point did you start to see the tea leaves? For me, it was North Carolina.
Well, North Carolina, and of course you're right, DDHQ and NewsNation were the first to call both Georgia and North Carolina. There was a lot of trepidation, a lot of hesitation from others because of those urban areas around Charlotte, Fulton County in Georgia as well as when you move on to Philadelphia, Detroit and Milwaukee about how those votes were coming in. And I think that's part of the story over the course of the last 24 hours. You know, Donald Trump, in the past in politics, we talked a lot about the Obama coalition in 2008 and 2012. Well, Donald Trump has fashioned his own kind of coalition, and he's really turned a lot of political assumptions on their heads and is going to cause a big reevaluation of conventional political wisdom, I think, going forward, Marni. You look at some of the people in this so-called coalition, or at least what I'm calling a coalition, Latino men voting, a majority of them voting for Donald Trump. African Americans. We talked about the vote around Milwaukee. We talked about the vote in Detroit and other urban centers in Philadelphia. African American men going towards Donald Trump in a big way, although perhaps not a majority. The women's vote, and you ask, what was our first inkling? It's when the vote in the suburban collar counties that we talked about so much around Philadelphia, Bucks County, Montgomery County, Macomb County, in Michigan, Dane County, in Wisconsin brings up another segment of this population, these folks that perhaps did not go as strongly for Democrats as Democrats would have hoped, and that would be the youth vote, because Dane County is the home of the University of Wisconsin in Madison. So a number of factors here, a number of demographic factors went Trump's way, did not show up for Kamala Harris, and I think that is the story of this 2024 election, Marni.
Yeah, a lot of pretty interesting data here when you talk about urban centers, New York, Cook County, and here in the Chicago area. Yeah. But then it also became an early indicator as I was watching Georgia, and we were talking to the Secretary of State here at NewsNation on the air last night, and he said 200,000 more voters showed up during this cycle than they did last time around. And then you start talking about the rural areas and Trump's reach to his base in those rural areas. What type of message does that send? What do you pick out of that data?
Well, what I pick out of the data, and you mentioned some of the unexpectedly close races in what are considered Democratic no-brainers, strongholds. I mean, you look at the race as a whole in New York State, and particularly in New York City. We were talking about that a lot last night. Shockingly strong turnout for Donald Trump. Obviously, he didn't win New York, but it was the same story in New Jersey. You look at some of the counties, the other counties in Pennsylvania outside of those collar counties in Philadelphia. You look at Luzerne County, Lackawanna County, Lehigh County. Some of these counties with significant Hispanic populations, all of them going for Trump, and that's unexpected, or at least Trump with a very strong showing. And when you start to talk about the vote in the aggregate, it's kind of dangerous at this point, Marni, because there's so many votes nationwide that are still yet to be counted, particularly in California. But you know, Donald Trump right now, I think in the aggregate stands at 71 million. That's 10 million below what Joe Biden won with 4 years ago. So again, hard to really to draw too many conclusions at this early time. But certainly Kamala Harris well below what even Donald Trump did, 12 million below what Donald Trump did 4 years ago, when she only has 66 million at this point, Marni.
Yeah, a lot we can glean from the popular vote at this point. Also, the results in the Senate with Republicans gaining control of the Senate right now. What stands out to you about some of the results in these races and some of the closeness as we have about a minute or so left in the House races?
Right. Well, I mean, it was a good map for Republicans in the Senate to begin with, right? They had Democrats were defending seats in red states in Montana with John Tester, who DDHQ has just called that for his opponent, Tim Sheehy. Montana now flipping from Democrat to Republican. Sherrod Brown, the longtime left-leaning senator from Ohio, survived all these years, political gravity finally bringing him down. So that was part of it. And many of these folks, Tester and Brown in particular, ran ahead of Kamala Harris in their states. The House of Representatives now, Marni, you know, as a longtime House reporter, all eyes have to be on the House, because if it goes Democratic, if Hakeem Jeffries, as opposed to Mike Johnson, is the next Speaker of the House, then that is the pressure point. And a lot of President Trump's agendas, President-elect Trump's agenda, I should say, is going to rest in the House of Representatives, and whether or not Democrats or Republicans are running the place. Because when you're in the House of Representatives, unlike the Senate, with all its funny rules, the House is just straight-up majority rules. They rule almost one of the tyrannical tyrannical majority, that a lot is going to be resting on how those races turned out. And we're not going to even find out probably for the next week because California counts its ballots so very slowly.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.